Welcome back to GaleForceWins Season 3.
The GaleForceWins podcast is proudly sponsored by Newfound Marketing, a digital marketing agency located in St. John's, Newfoundland. Visit our website at newfoundmarketing.ca to find out how we can help your business grow. Newfound Marketing, a complement to your marketing team.
Welcome to GaleForceWins. We are in Budapest, Hungary. We have a very special guest here today. We are going to delve into her journey and what makes Cindy tick. But before I do, I would like to introduce you once again to a very special guest host. We have a beautiful guest host here today. Why don't you just say a few words, introduce yourself to
So my name is Judith, and I'm the co-host of GaleForceWins. I'm so honored to be put in this position. And this morning we are in downtown Budapest, one of the most gorgeous places in town. It's built in the late 19th centuries. The cafe, it's called New York Cafe. And Jerry, how do you like Budapest so far? We had quite a journey.
It's an incredible journey, Judith. We yesterday went out 2.5 hours to a vineyard, Mount St. George, I believe it was called. Just beautiful. But I can tell you that the city is so vibrant. And I think people can see the ornate ceilings. So many of the buildings are just built with care, and I'm really in awe of the community, and it's just such a pleasure to be hosted by you and your husband Albert. So I just think it's a wonderful experience, and I think everyone in Canada deserves to experience this at some point in their life. And I think we can talk to Cindy now about
Yes.
that.
Yes.
Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, Cindy?
Sure. My name is Cindy. I originally came from Taiwan, but I have both a Taiwanese citizenship. I also a Canadian citizenship. And actually nowadays, when people ask me where I'm from, I get a little bit confused because I actually have lived in Taiwan first, then Vancouver, Canada, then New York, and it's 10 years each.
Where first?
Taiwan.
Taiwan.
Tainan first, and then Vancouver, Canada, and then New York for 10 years each, so I get a little bit identity crisis on that. Yeah. I left Taiwan when I was 13 years old. I went with my family from Tainan to Vancouver, Canada, and it was quite a big culture shock. I think our family was the only family that, my immediate family was the only family that moved from Taiwan to Canada. And it was, first of all, even though when I was in Taiwan, I took a lot of English classes because my family has always wanted to immigrate. I think that's always my parents' goal, to move there, to move abroad. And so they signed me up for a lot of English classes, and I thought I was doing quite well until I landed in Vancouver, and just not all my 10 years of English training went out the window. I couldn't form a sentence. I was not really passing, not doing well in school because I don't understand the language. But thankfully, one of my neighbors was actually he's just a daughter of the Taiwanese diplomat in Vancouver, and she was patient enough to introduce me to the language, speak to me in Chinese as well as in English.
It's interesting listening to that because,
Yes.
Judith, you told me a very similar story about you thought your English was good, but when you arrived in Canada, you struggled a little bit. Did you want to mention a little bit about that, your own experience?
And I think it's so important that we keep talking about it, the language barrier, because Canada's policy, obviously welcoming more immigrants. I just heard that that's the focus for Canada, welcoming more and more immigrants. And it's so important to talk about the language barrier that these new Canadians are having, because that was a real barrier for me for a long time. But I have to tell you that it was more like a mindset barrier than a real life barrier, because I think our English is better than we think it is.
Yes,
and
yes.
I always encourage people to keep their accent and keep trying, because you will get there. I got there, and no doubt that your English is perfect
Thank you.
now.
It's part of my self-consciousness is also, there were just during back then in Taiwan, there's just not enough resources to learn English. Nowadays, in the last 20 years, it's gotten a lot better. But back when I was younger, I was at top of school in English learning, but that did not work out for me so well when I first arrived in Canada. But thankfully the Canadian culture is quite friendly. I was never bullied. I was really welcome into the school. All my classes were very, very kind to me, they just kept me in, they welcomed me to their group even though I don't really speak the language. But during that time, just also because I didn't speak the language in the first year, that's when I dived myself into doing a lot of sports and doing a lot of music, because those two things, you don't really need language for it. And I picked up track and field during that time because I couldn't really understand a lot of sports rules like basketball or soccer, but running the straight line, no problem. I can learn point to where I should run. I can run in the straight line. So I got really, really good at track and field for that 1 year, and thankfully I was able to pick up the language within the first year and a half. And I went through the whole ESL program in the first year and a half. And I was quite determined to get out of it as soon as I get into high school, because I think I want the full Canadian experience versus being part of the more smaller ESL group. So yeah,
that's fascinating. So you started in track and field, and that helped in terms of meeting friends. And would you say that friendships help the language barrier get better, your language?
At least it made me feel I was part of the community without needing to converse in the most proper way. Yeah.
And I can attest to that my children were the same. So when we arrived to Canada, they didn't speak a word in English, but they were put in like a regular English class. They had a fantastic English as a second language teacher. And the first thing we did, me and my husband, we put them into organized sport. So it's skating and swimming, and they really found their community. So it's a good way to feel like you're part of the Canadian community, to participate in sports. And music. So you mentioned music as well.
So my family, as soon as I moved to Canada, put me in music class. However, I think my love for music started way before that. I actually, while I was back in Taiwan, I got introduced to Hungarian culture without realizing it. So during that time, I really...
Introduced to what culture?
Hungarian culture.
Hungarian
culture.
In Taiwan?
Without realizing it. So during that time, the cartoon Tom and Jerry was really, really popular. And as you know, there was one episode with Tom playing the piano, with Jerry just doing a lot of mischief to Tom. And that was my favorite episode, not realizing the piece they were playing was a Hungarian Rhapsody. Yeah, so that was my favorite music for a long time. And actually back then when I was in Taiwan, I always thought maybe someday I'll work in either animation, because I love drawing, or I would do maybe part of Disney workshop would be lovely as well. And so I always loved music, and I just didn't have a chance to learn piano and flute until I came to Canada.
We'll talk about the piano first. So which would you say is your first instrument?
My first instrument is piano when I started learning at 13. I think flute came in when I went into high school. And a funny ESL story is my mom wanted me to play the flute, but when she's signing up for the elementary school band, she picked the wrong instrument. She picked the clarinet, and thinking that was the flute. So I came home playing the clarinet, and she said, "How come you're not doing it like this?" I'm like, "No, that's an instrument you picked for me." So I also know a little bit of clarinet, and I got switched back to flute in my 8th grade.
Well, I just want to, it's interesting you brought your mom up.
Yes.
Let's talk a little bit about that. So your mom and dad, did they speak good English coming to Vancouver? Or?
I thought he did until he arrived in Vancouver. Thankfully, there's a big Asian community in Vancouver that they were able to get by. But my dad is quite studious towards the English language. When he was in Taiwan, he apparently memorized the entire dictionary when he was in Taiwan. But that's not entirely helpful to actually translating that to speaking the language. I think a lot of the polyglot community, they say that to learn the language, you have to immerse yourself into the language. So a lot of the listening passively to the language and also speaking to the language is very important.
Well, the reason I bring it up is that your mom made a mistake between the flute and clarinet. Was
Yes.
that part of the translation of the words, or she just didn't realize?
I don't think she realized it at the
Okay.
point. She thought she knew the word flute until I came home playing it like this. She's like, no, you need to play it. She tried to make me play it like this. I'm like, no, that's not how it was taught in school.
So tell us a little bit about how it felt to start becoming better at the instrument.
I think the first time I felt like I was doing well on the instrument is when I set up to learn the piano. My goal was to play one of Richard Clayderman pieces, because I grew up, one of my aunt used to play that every day, so I always loved the sound of it. And I always thought it would take a long time to learn those pieces, but actually it took me only a couple of months, and so it was much easier than I thought. So that gave me a sense of like motivation and a lot of like instant reward. So I personally really love playing instrument because the instrument gives it back to you how much effort you put in, and especially when nowadays I travel a lot, I feel like my instruments are my intimate friends, because when I feel angry, I can put up
Channel
I
your.
can channel my anger to it. When I feel heartbroken, I can play some sad song just to cope. And then when I'm feeling happy, I can play happy songs. It's just the instrument. Instruments is a good companion to expressing emotions.
So you still play to this day?
Yes.
Yes. And your preference, classical, rock and roll, a little bit of both, jazz? What kind of genres are you playing?
I love learning the classical genre. I play nowadays. I also start improvising on Taiwanese folk songs, because I play it, I record it, and send it to my family, and that they really like that. Yeah.
Isn't that beautiful, Judith?
Yeah, it is. And then that would be, we would think that this is a straight way that led you to a career in music. But in fact, our career path is never linear.
No.
It's full of zigzags and full of different paths. So can you talk us a little bit about what this initial love for music, but you chose a different career path?
Sure. I always loved music. I guess now thinking back, I always want to contribute to that world in some way. But from a very young age, I knew that I did not want to be a musician. It's not the lifestyle that I want. It's a lot of the pressure. It's a lot of traveling, a lot of instability that I always think I did not want to be a musician. I get a lot of stage fright. Like you mentioned, like I still get a lot of stage, even though I'm on stage quite a bit with my musicians. So in that way, I also love numbers. That's another thing that when I first moved to Canada, can't really do English, was feeling English in social studies, but was doing extremely well in math, because numbers is universal across the world. So if you see a pattern, the things I got really good at and I'm passionate about is always, they're not language oriented. So I was really interested in math. When I was in high school, I went to Sir Winston Churchill High School. They have a special program for preparing people to be future accountants. So I signed up for that program during high school, thinking I was going to become an accountant in the future, because I love numbers, I love the structure of it. Then I graduated high school and then went into UBC Sauder School of Business. Then I took one class in accounting in university and said, okay, that's not for me.
Really? So
Yes.
you're into numbers,
Yes.
but accounting, you knew right away it wasn't for you?
I thought it was my life career when I was in high school, but then I realized what we learned in high school was more bookkeeping, which like actually writing down bookkeeping, like bookkeeping in the 90s without the QuickBooks program.
Yeah.
So as soon as I graduated to university, where they teach you actually what happens in an accounting firm, which is a lot of like learning about tax, learning about how to use the programs, that I realized that's not quite for me.
Interesting. So your love of math did not lead you into an accounting career, but you did do business at UBC.
Yes.
UBC, by the way, is probably one of my most favorite universities. The campus is absolutely stunning. Tell us a little bit about your time at UBC and what you spent your time studying.
So eventually I didn't deviate too far. I went from accounting to finance instead. So it's still number oriented. I think the first 2 years in UBC, and this is back like 10 years ago, so I'm not sure the program's still the same. The first 2 years, you just do general studies. You get to dabble in marketing, human resources, business law, just figure out what you like to do. And I think during that time, I was quite anxious about like what job should I aim for in the future. And I remember I was very much of like if I have a question, then I have to go figure out what the answer would be. So right away, I made an appointment with the Career Center. I asked them to give me this big binder of all the jobs that's available to business graduates. So I opened and I read through them all, and at that time I had my mindset on like doing something finance related, and I remember reading about investment banking that it explained the job as like it's a lot of long hours, a lot of staying late in the office, a lot of challenges, very, very difficult. So I thought, well, if I'm passionate about finance, I want to pick this job even though it's challenging because I'll be spending long hours learning finance that eventually I will probably come out of it knowing a bit more about finance than before. So I picked investment banking and then basically designed my my networking opportunities and also my courses around like getting a job in investment banking.
Just so I'm clear, and I did a business degree,
Yes.
more in the marketing side of things. When people say finance, I'm not quite sure. So it's banking. Is it more than banking? How would you, I guess, describe finance? A broad description of finance.
It's basic. Finance to me, it's the very first step of finance is interest compounding, and everything else that has to do with finance just kind of built on top of that. So within that, there's retail banking, there's capital markets that deals with like front office tasks, and even nowadays, like there's now digital finance, like fintech, which is a field that I have no idea about, but that's like kind of beyond my understanding. So I think it's a better person to ask about that question. I don't think of myself as finance expert anymore because it's me being in finance. That's probably close to 7 years ago since last time I was in finance industry.
So,
yes.
Go ahead, Judy.
and you landed a job after graduating from UBC. You landed a job as a
investment banking analyst in New York City. And it was quite a journey because I think as soon as I got into finance, I realized it'd be very, very difficult for me to get into investment banking in Vancouver. At the time, it was probably like two or three investment banks that's operating in Vancouver, and each year they only hire 4 analysts out of school. So working the math, like, well, that's 4 positions for all of us. That's enough in the same year. So right away I decided that I probably need to look to the East Coast for jobs. So I basically designed my coursework that I would spend one semester taking, I think, like more than 8 courses per semester. So I can fill up most of my requirements and spend the second semester. I basically moved to Toronto just to network there, meet the people there, because as a lot of us didn't know that most of the East Coast company only hire from East Coast schools. So then, even though South School is actually a great school with a great program, one thing they're lacking is they don't have enough work opportunities within Canada. So I was luckily able to realize that quite early on that I was able to take a few months whenever I can to go to East Coast just to meet people there and then meet people in New York. And what story I like to tell is that even though during the recruiting season in Vancouver, I didn't even get a first interview. Like none of the companies were even interested in meeting me, were reading through my resume, that even though I was constantly rejected in Vancouver, that I was able to get a job in New York.
That's absolutely fascinating.
I agree.
At this young age, she's making the second big move from Taiwan to Canada, then from the west coast of Canada to the east coast of the US, and that's not even the end of her journey.
No.
That's just the beginning of her journey, and 2 major changes and like a big move. That's quite fascinating.
Well, I agree. I'm exactly on the same wavelength as you, Judith. How old were you at this point? You're now what age?
21 or so.
21.
Actually, before I graduated,
wow.
it'd be 19 when I first
Wow.
moved to Toronto.
Amazing.
So she's 13, you come from Taiwan, you're in Vancouver. At
Yes.
21 or 19,
Yes.
you're now in New York City.
Yes.
Like, I'm overwhelmed just listening and thinking about it. Tell us a little bit, and I think this is the same thinking you had.
Yes.
We are very interested in people's pivot and people's talk a little bit about what it was like. So you're not getting interviews, but you're showing up at some that you get. Are these like on 75th floor of a building? Describe a little bit about what it was like in New York, looking for a job.
I think at that time I was so young and so, I guess, like naive that I didn't realize the location switch would give you such a big lifestyle change. I think all I wanted to do, my focus was that I want to do investment banking, not in Vancouver. Everything else is just a consequence of it that I didn't really put into much thought about, like, oh, I'm moving to New York. I didn't put too much, like, I don't know, like stress about moving to New York or like going to New York. I think I was just very focused on achieving my goal that I forgot. It was kind of like a tunnel vision that
you forgot to worry about.
I forgot
things.
to worry.
She forgot to be afraid of change.
And I think as an immigrant, you learn to have that mindset that if you don't just be a bit fearless, you never actually immerse yourself into the new culture.
So are you staying in a hotel at this point, staying with friends? Because you're looking for a job. How long did that search take? And where were you while you were doing this?
I think from me being interested in investment banking and trying to get an internship and failed, to me getting the actual offer was about 2 years.
Wow.
2 years?
Because you had to, the path of investment banking that,
I'm shocked. Like, that's a long time.
This is perseverance.
I was thinking you might say 2 months, and I would think that was long.
This is coming from immigrant backgrounds, like the perseverance that you don't give up. You just laser focus on what you want to achieve, and then you forget about being afraid of all the challenges that are ahead of you. That's fascinating.
Yeah, I'm sure you're experiencing when you move to Canada. I think as an immigrant, you learn to deal with rejection and embarrassment with a sense of ease and humor, because you're constantly bombarded with it when you first move to a new culture. You're saying something silly because you use the wrong grammar. Some people were like, we're just kind of like not you, making a joke. And coming from that, you just learn to, you know what, not to take things so personally, because a lot of times it could be a misunderstanding where it just doesn't matter. Yeah.
So now you landed the job as a bank investment analyst, right? So tell us a little bit about those years in the world of finance in New York, the capital of the world, right?
I thought I was very lucky to have that job opportunity, and from getting a job was through like networking. I met a lot of people, so through referrals, I was able to squeeze into these interview spots, because investment banking is a really competitive field. I think I really love working in Europe because during that time I was covering the retail industry with a specialization in fashion retail, like luxury fashion. So as a girl in the 20s, I was loving it, and I would not have that opportunity if I stayed in Vancouver, because Vancouver, they usually focus on like forestry and oil and gas, not so like sexy, interesting for a girl at early 20s. So I was able to go to New York and meet like clients that are fashion designers. At one point, one of our clients is a Nine West Shoes, which I love that shoe brand. Got a few freebies here and there. Got to attend a few fashion shows. It was lovely.
Wow. Yeah. And what made you make yet another change? So for how long you been working in this field?
So even though my goal when I was 19 is to go into investment banking, I always thought of it as a stepping stone. I think during that time, I thought I would use investment banking as like a jump for my career, then pivot that to maybe a corporate development role in a retail company. And then 2013 happened. That's when I started kind of deviating from like retail and corporate planning to more music, because that's the year I met a Hungarian musician in New York.
Hungarian musician in New York.
Yes, in New York.
So maybe running back a little bit, when I was a teenage years, I when I was even young, actually, probably like 5 years old, I saw the Tom and Jerry episode. I really loved that piece. So during my teenage years, I just had a thought like, let me look up what this piece is, and I realized that that's when I found a lot of YouTube videos for Hungarian Rhapsody, and I then realized and started learning more about the composer, F Liszt, the composer. Fell in love with the piece La Campanella and more his piano works. Then he became my favorite composer. And
I think it's appropriate. The piano seems to be getting louder as we're talking here. But anyway, go ahead.
Playing the Rhapsody, the Hungarian Rhapsody.
Is that what it is?
No, it's
no,
not.
I think it's just a jazz.
I wish.
Yes.
We can ask him.
Sorry for interrupting.
That's okay. And then I moved to New York. I thought, well, I'm in New York City. There's a lot of like music and culture here. I would love to watch a live concert here. So I found one of the Hungarian pianists, Adam Gyorgy, was coming to New York. I saw that on his Facebook update that he's coming to New York. He's going to have a concert. So I started looking at all the ticket website, like where I can buy a ticket, and I couldn't find the ticket for his supposedly concert anywhere. So I emailed his manager on his corporate website, and turns out it was the concert he was referring to was a private event for his sponsors, but the manager was kind enough to offer me a ticket to go watch him. Yes.
A private event, and you got a ticket.
Yes. It was audience. I mean, this guy travels around the world, has sold out Carnegie Hall concerts, and here I am sitting in front row with the audience of 20 watching him perform.
Wow.
An audience of 20?
At the Carnegie Hall.
No, this was a Steinway Hall, the old Steinway Hall.
Okay.
The old Steinway Hall that
So was this tables, or was it seats? Or?
It was just like a few chairs surrounding the Steinway piano.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you feel a little uncomfortable because you didn't know anyone, right?
Because everybody was asking me, so how did you know Adam? I'm like, I don't. I don't. I just found it. I'm like, I found this concert on the website, and at the time, David was the manager. He was nice enough to offer me a ticket to come watch him, and I met him, and we just get along really well. And actually, when I started, he said I kind of stuck up like a sore thumb in the audience seat because he knew everybody else. These are his private friends, his personal friend, his sponsor, and here I'm just sitting like do.
Let me ask you, what instrument is he playing?
Piano.
Piano. So he's on stage playing piano, and he sees you there, and he's trying to play, and like, who is she? Right?
Who is she? So there was like a little hangout afterwards. Then he asked like, how did I snuck myself into this concert? And I kind of explained that, well, I'm actually been a big fan for a while, and David was nice enough to invite me to the concert. And then as I was talking to him, I made a joke that I didn't realize he spoke English, because when I watched him online, I was watching him play the piano. So just find that he has speak fluent English. He has been in New York for 10 years at the time. That we just become really good friends. And sure enough, I think after meeting him, I just want to offer help. Like I said, I always want to contribute to the music world, but I'm not sure how. I don't think of myself as a performing artist, but I do have a business background. I can do project planning, and lucky enough, a few months later, that he has a sponsorship inviting him to perform in Canada, and actually of all city, they picked Vancouver as a city. So I'm like,
you know a little bit about Vancouver.
I knew about the Vancouver market, so I said, well, can I just volunteer my time at the concert production? Because he's never, I think at that time, he's only performed in Canada once in Toronto in a much smaller venue. And this is the first time he's having a big concert in Canada. So I thought, Vancouver, it's the first time there, why don't I just share some insight, help you a little bit? And I think,
are you dealing with him or his manager at this point?
Both.
Both. Yeah.
Yes. So at the time, I think my position started as I was imagining just like a small volunteer, me handing out flyers, sitting there, managing just a few admin things. That position transitioned from like a volunteer position to more or less a production lead within like a couple of months. Because next thing you know, I was putting together marketing documents for him. Sorry.
Just let me stop you for a second. So you're still working in New York, though, at this point?
In investment banking, yes.
But you have a volunteer role that has now brought you back to Vancouver. So you took some vacation time from your other job? How did that transition work?
I think it coincided with Well, luckily nowadays a lot of marketing can be done digitally. So
Right.
I think a lot of the production planning I did it just virtually.
Right.
It's a lot of like calling during my lunch hours, in the 1 hour that I have, calling in late hours when I'm off work.
Wow.
I made a lot of phone calls to Vancouver just to build that foundation, like a lot of connections there. I reached out to a lot of music schools. I reached out to the newspaper outlet there, and this is all just me
Thinking.
pulling things out of my head.
Yeah,
Like I hadn't done production planning before, nor
No
event
experience. I
planning. No
love it.
experience.
So it's just wonderful how the universe works for us,
Yes.
right? Always. And it's so many people would say that, oh, I was lucky, I got lucky, and then, oh, I was in the right time, in the right place.
Mhm.
But it's not true. The
Yeah.
universe is putting you there because that's your intention. That's your internal drive to be
Yeah.
there. And it always works out. And the most fascinating way.
Yeah, I didn't knew that I have a talent for music production or concert planning until I met this artist randomly, and a few months later, he's performing in Vancouver. I didn't plan it; it was kind of fell into my lap, and I started preparing a lot. I just started thinking about what could he possibly need in marketing there, and then actually, I was given a lot of freedom just to do whatever I want into the marketing him in Vancouver. So I think eventually I got him in the it's Metro or 24, which is like the newspaper that you see on the bus stations.
Yes.
So I got him in the weekend, like from full page marketing, full page bio on the page on the weekend issue, which is has the highest readership during the weekend. And and also luckily I got connected with my university professor because I was researching is there any like classical music blogs in Canada, and I found a blog. And I recognized the name, and because he was my university econ professor, that he was doing a classical music blog as a side hustle.
You can't be serious.
I was shocked too, but I didn't think he would remember me, so I just emailed him like, hey, I'm so and so. I'm just a random person. You're emailing me for this artist, and he actually emailed back. I remember you in my class 2 years ago.
Wow.
I didn't think he would remember me, but he did. So just from that personal connection, he definitely helped us a lot into some additional promotion in the city.
So the artist, Adam is his name?
Yes.
What's his name again? His last
Adam
name?
Gyorgy.
So he's supposed to perform one night and
Mhm.
you're promoting it? Is that, or is he going to be more than one night and you're trying to organize him to visit things? Or is it primarily just the one night and you're marketing him?
It's the big event is the concert at Chan Centre in UBC.
Right.
And then there's additional like meet and greets in a few music schools.
So you set that up.
Yes.
And that was your brainstorm, basically, because...
I think I was just calling people, and people, as in Vancouver Canadians, are just very welcoming. So I think a lot of these like meetups just kind of came to fruition just naturally from my conversations with them. Yeah.
So I take it the event went well. Tell us a
Yes.
little bit about how that went and then where that took you.
It felt really surreal to go from, talking about it over a phone call about this concert that might happen in a couple of months to, writing a few emails to actually seeing audience sitting in the seat that you put
You
in.
went there to be part of it.
Yes. And actually, I should probably thank my sister. She helped a lot during the promotion time. Because she, poor girl, she had to go like door to door, putting posters up in different restaurants. And it was actually quite nice to do that because I got to speak to a lot of the local immigrant communities. I got to visit a lot of restaurants there for second-gen Asians that just started making in Vancouver, and they see me trying to do my own entrepreneurial things in Vancouver. So they were extremely supportive.
I worked in marketing for 30 years.
Yes.
What you just described, your sister putting up those posters, I don't know if you know the term guerrilla marketing.
Yes.
Have you heard?
Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
That's guerrilla marketing.
Yes.
And Vancouver's a big place to try and do that in.
Yes. So I love talking to people during that time. So the door-to-doorness did not bother me. Also, a side note, I did door-to-door sales for a summer when I was in university. That's a whole nother story. And then, so I got like few big posters. I think it wasn't a lot of big reach because I was not there full time. I had to do my full-time job in New York as well, and however, I think I got to hit big things like being part of the 24th issue and having a big digital poster in Oak Ridge Mall. It was one of the big wins that I got, and being connected to the biggest classical blog in Canada it's one of the few things that kind of landed as I was doing it. And the thrill of seeing the people that you spoke to, because basically everybody that's sitting in the concert hall, I had spoken to them at some point through some connection. So seeing them sitting there, seeing them enjoying the concert, meeting the artists afterwards was it was a great sort of like feeling.
So you're still living in New York and working with this musician and the manager, but you're still working in the bank industry.
Yes.
So what was the tipping point when you decided that, okay, enough of finance, and this is my path and this is my way, and then in the back there's Frank Sinatra's My Way.
Yes.
So
It is, isn't it?
yes. It is my way, and Cindy's talking about her way.
I'm just looking at the camera here. The piano player is down there. I'm not sure if the viewers can see, but it's such a perfect... You set this up, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. I did.
But it's interesting. Judith and I both love the tipping point, and I like that. The tipping point. So what was the tipping point, and how long did it take?
I think it was not like an instant thing.
No.
I think it was as for me, it slowly and gradually, music just like chipping and start dominating my life. I think when I was producing the Vancouver tour, I think I lost like 10 kilograms. I was so thin because I wasn't sleeping from working overtime. I wasn't eating because I was using the 1 hour lunch time to do the phone calls. But it was I love doing it, and seeing the result of my hard work, actually people showing up. It's a very different feeling from like doing things on Excel, which I also love, and doing the project planning and strategy planning for a client.
Can we say, is it fair to say that you found your passion? So you did it passionately, not just you liked it, you loved it, but that was that you woke up with this, you went to bed with this in your mind, and you were really passionate about it.
I take it you were really, really good at finance, and you still are passionate about finance, but it seems to me that the musical piece of your life overtake it, right? So at some point, tell us, how much thinking you'd be working on finance and then thinking about the other piece, I would imagine.
I think some people would misconstrue into me moving from finance to music as like, oh, I am giving the boring corporate job into the fun creative world. I don't think that's exactly true, because I actually also really enjoyed my job at the banking world. Now I'm doing a lot more music stuff. I miss the Excel stuff. I also love Excel.
You're the only person that's ever said to me they miss Excel stuff. Well, my business partner Alan's not here. He loves Excel spreadsheets. But anyway, go on.
Yes, I love Excel. I would love to do more Excel. In fact, when I was working at the agency, I would just randomly produce reports, like year-end marketing reports, or like tour reports on Excel, and I would
for the music.
Yeah. With the music agency, I will send it. I don't know if anybody reads it. I think I sometimes open it and read it on my own. I don't think anybody's actually paying attention to it, but I like doing it.
They were paying attention, I think, weren't they? So tell us, you're working with Adam and his manager.
Yes.
Talk a little bit about the evolution of where that took you. Where did you go with that experience?
I think I didn't really think of being a classical producer as a full-time job until like a few years later. I think when I made the full switch was 2017. During that time, that I basically was more or less going from like volunteering with tours when he's performing in New York to doing maybe like, I think, a transition from volunteer to like project-oriented work to part-time work. Just my role just started to grow and grow work organically. And I think during 2017, I just had the thought that maybe I should travel, because I do love working and sitting in front of my spreadsheet, but my little cubicle of like a few meters is kind of my world. I want to see a little bit more. So during that time, I thought, why don't I switch over to doing music full time, because I get to travel with the team, and at that time I was single. I have no responsibilities. I can be a bit reckless. I think that time I was 27, so I can be. I just basically make a reckless move of like giving my corporate role at a tech company at the time to doing this.
As long as following our hearts, it
Yes.
means being reckless. I don't think so.
100% I agree. One of the challenges when that happens is the support of family and friends. Was that a tough conversation with mom and dad?
Oh, yes.
Yes. They must
Oh,
have
it
thought.
was.
They must have thought you'd lost your mind, did they?
Oh, definitely. Because when I gave up my corporate job, I was working with a really, really big tech company called LivePerson, and they're publicly traded in this New York Stock Exchange. They provide everything from like job security, a steady promotional track to additional benefits, and I was going to give that all up. So my immigrant family went a little bit nuts about why was I doing this at 27. I should be thinking about getting married. I should be thinking about settling down. Everything about settling down.
Yeah.
I thought, well, actually, I would settle down a couple years later, but this is my last chance to be, young and reckless.
Following your heart.
Yes.
So you cut ties in the finance world. Tell us about that. You just went headlong into the music industry.
And funny enough that this person's playing this piece. This is the Richard Clayderman piece that I wanted to learn when I first.
You have to be kidding me.
Yes, it's quite.
We set this up. I did it on purpose.
Did you tell them? Seriously?
Yes, I did it on purpose.
Okay. All right. You
Whatever's
told them to
in
play
this-
these songs.
Whatever's in this topic is that he's backing us with
Yes.
the right classical piece.
Okay.
Yeah, my aunt used to play this every day, and it was our doorbell ringtone.
Unreal.
And so I always wanted to learn when I was like very, very young, and I finally got to play it for the first time when I was 13. Yes.
Wow.
So now I basically made up my mind. I want to do concert productions, and doing the switch again. I think it's the same situation as moving to New York for banking. I just forgot to be afraid. I forgot about.
I love this. I love this. I forgot to be afraid.
I forgot to be afraid, and I think that's when you feel like when you're passionate about something. And so lucky enough that by the time I wanted to switch over to music, I have been volunteering and working part-time with the AGP agency for I think like 4 or 5 years. That there was no interview process. I said I want to do it full-time. He said, we've been waiting for you for all these years. So I got signed on. And
So this is the agency that had become, you had done some part-time work for them?
Yes.
And we've been waiting through all these years. Isn't that awesome?
Yes. So switching over was like a pretty smooth transition because they know me, they know my work, and a lot that time was I was adding a lot of like business structure to the agency as well. So from there, I got to travel with the artists. We produced quite a lot of tours all around the world. I think from there, I got to visit about I think it's 1 year. We visited like 12 cities in 1 year, and I usually split my year between. I think of it in quarters. A quarter we would be in New York doing the annual Carnegie Hall production. Then a quarter would be somewhere in Asia, and then 1 quarter would be in Europe doing the summer festival, and then 1 quarter would be just whichever city is inviting us. Yeah.
So during that period of time that you came to Hungary for the first time?
Yes.
Yes. Okay,
Yes,
just tell us a little bit about that.
Finally, I got to visit Hungary, I think. The first visit was 2018. Yes, I think 2018 and 2019. I came here. It was just for like a business meeting for one of the potential artists we're gonna bring into the agency. His name is Spencer Sapeshi. He plays the clarinet much better than I do. And then I think during that time, I only booked a one-way ticket coming here. Things were working on its own. See what happens. Came here, and then now realizing the return ticket at the time, because it's during the summer, it was like, I think, over $1,000 for one-way ticket back to New York. So I thought, nah, that's not gonna work. I will stay a couple more weeks until the ticket go down to reasonable prices. So
This is fascinating what you're telling us.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
but my agency thought, well, we'll only pay for your hotel for like a week. We're not sure what's gonna happen with that. And I think the agency was also going to Asia for the second part of the tour, so they can't really take care of me. So I don't know how I got around to. I called around, looking around for things to do in Hungary, and I found a volunteer organization that basically hire English speakers to teach English to Hungarian children here, but they'll pay for accommodation and travel. So I got to spend the summer here during that year, and I love the Hungarian summer here. I think of all the places I've been to, Hungary has the best weather and like atmosphere during the summer.
I believe that because it's quite nice here in November.
Yeah, November's not so like welcoming of a season to be here, but definitely find time to come here during the summer. You will fall in love, because I think that summer being here and then being around the Hungarian children who are so eager to learn the English language, it was quite. I had a great time.
So you're still working for the agency. You're teaching English in Hungary and working for the agency.
It
Is
was
that
just
right?
a volunteer position, yeah.
And I was wondering that at this time you still have your apartment in New York, or you gave up everything?
I think I still have it.
You still have the apartment in New York, so you're living only temporarily in Hungary
Yes,
during the summer.
yes.
So what's next?
Um,
I can't wait
Yeah.
to hear.
What is next? I think, what is next after the volunteer position? I think still again a lot of like the touring. I think I decided to keep my apartment in New York, even though it's ridiculously expensive to keep apartment there. It's because I needed at least a home base to
Yeah.
return to. When you're around with the suitcase, living hotel to hotels or crashing in friends' places, you do lose a sense of self over time. So I have learned to like bring my own shampoo, bring my own makeup, even though it's quite clunky. I think having like something that smells like yourself is really important when you're spending 70% of your life not being at home and being on the move all the time. And actually, at my volunteer position with the English teaching camp in Hungary, I met a lot of like traveling backpackers that was kind of in their own way living the similar lifestyle, like traveling around. A lot of them are like travel bloggers. One of them was she writes articles, like traveling articles for like a travel agency in Ireland, I think. And she said a funny thing that when you travel with just one suitcase of clothes for a whole year, after 1 year you just want to burn everything in there and buy something brand new, because we're wearing the same 5 outfits for the whole year, which for a girl it's like torture to not be able to switch things. But then I also learned to pack minimalistically. I learned, I'm not sure if this is a good habit or not, I'm able to pack up my life within 3 hours and then just go on an airplane.
That's a life skill.
It is.
More than one time I need to, I have found a situation where I bought a plane ticket in the morning and I'm on the plane at night, going to the next city and just closing my apartment for,
Wow.
yes.
So tell us where you are in the moment, and then we'll follow that up with where you're going, what's on the horizon. So where are you right now in the moment?
Where I am right now, so I moved to Hungary 2 years ago, and I came here because at the time the world was going crazy, and I just want to go to somewhere that's more relaxing. I remember the lovely Hungarian summer that I had here, so I decided to come here for a few months. I thought I would be here for a few months, then I would go back to New York. But then just fell in love with being here. People here are super friendly. I think I met a few of my close friends on my first night in Budapest. And during that time, Budapest just felt like a untouched paradise, because during that time there was not a lot of restrictions. People were just enjoying their life without much fear, because there's a lot of protection around, like taking care of the citizen about their health. And I felt like I found a piece of like relaxing heaven, and also like being able to go around, visit Lake Balaton and going on sailing trips there. It was quite lovely. So that's where I've been here for 2 years, trying very hard to learn the language. and I'm not sure where I'm gonna be. Honestly, I don't know where I'm gonna be next couple of years because I see a pattern in my life. I tend to just make up my mind about moving or make up my mind about careers change and just kind of pack up and go.
But you're currently in the music promotion business?
Yes.
Still?
Yes.
With the same agency?
Yes.
Yes.
We just closed down a Liszt, Franz Liszt piano competition in Carnegie Hall, and that we brought in 4 international pianists, and they all played the Franz Liszt piano concerto, which is like heaven for me. I love that piece, and being able to hear the top performers to perform that piece, it's a great feeling.
So I'm going to ask this question, but I'm not sure you're going to be able to answer it because you've kind of answered it already.
Sure.
But what's on the horizon for you? Given that you can buy a ticket in the morning and get on a plane in the afternoon, what is on the horizon for you?
I would like to stay in Hungary for a couple more years. I would love to at least be able to speak and write the language. I want to pass at least the B level exam for the Hungarian language test. And then I think I will always do concert production in my life. The question's more about whether I want to do it part-time or full-time. Full-time can take quite a physical, emotional toll on you because it's really, really stressful. But in the future, this might sound a bit cheesy. I think about time I actually think about settling down. I'm 34 years old now. I would love to have a family one day. So even though I love my job, I now it's trying to think about maybe I need to step back a little bit on my career and focus about maybe somebody.
But isn't it fantastic that she had her first 10 years in Taiwan, then the next 10 years in Canada, then the next 10 years in New York, and now she's just here in Hungary.
No, it's an incredible story. Well, I'm going to ask you, Judith, what do you think of this story that you've heard? We're coming to the end of our conversation. Give us your thoughts on this.
Well, I always thought that the universe is working for me, but now I realize that the universe is working for all of us. So all the viewers who are watching this, that whenever you have the courage to make the changes in your life, that you follow your heart, the universe is always has your back. So Cindy is the proof of that. A fantastic life story, so inspiring for so many people who are afraid to make the change. So thank you so much for having here with us and sharing your life story. I think we could be just happy to listen to that.
One last question. Sure. If you were to give anyone watching this a piece of advice, be it an immigrant, be it anybody, what piece of advice would you give?
Dream big, aim high, and try to work as smart as you can, because if you can you at least land close to your goals.
Thank you for tuning in to GaleForceWins. That's GaleForceWins, WINS.com.